Welcome back to the channel, and stay tuned to see if I could turn a profit this week despite playing some of the worst poker of my life. For the year 2025, I'm trying to make $25 an hour while playing the same amount of hours at both 1-2 and 1-3. After winning 4 figures last week, let's see where we stand. As for 1-2, the stats have been steady. I played 93.5 hours in this game and profited $2,537 for an hourly win rate of $27.13. Love to finish the year winning above $25 an hour in this stake alone, so gonna do my best to make it happen. As for our 1-3 stats, the swings have been insane. I played 91 hours even in this game, and thanks to a dream session last week where I won $1,123, I've now profited $4,107 for an hourly win rate of $45.13. If we combine all these stats, I've now played 184.5 hours of live poker in 2025 and profited $6,644 for an hourly win rate of $36.01. I have 15.5 hours left to poker in 2025 to reach 100 hours played at each stake. So let's see if we could avoid a fourth quarter choke by heading out to the nicest card room in Northern California, which is none other than Stone's Gambling Hall. For day one, we buy into the 1-3 match stack game for $500 and get dealt our first playable hand in about 20 minutes into the session. To increase the action, I throw on the $6 under the gun straddle, and 5 people call the $6 before action gets to me and I look down at ace-king of diamonds. Since I'm out of position against most of the field, I wanted to raise an amount where I could avoid taking this hand super multi-way, but also not force everyone to fold. So I settle on a sizing of $45. It seems to have done the trick because I just get called by the low jack, increasing this pot to 110. Off to one of the driest flops of all time when it rolls out 7-7 deuce rainbow. Sitting here with 2 overcards in the range advantage, it's time to continue my story that I have a monster. I c-bet for $50, to which he quickly calls. Since our opponent didn't raise pre-flop, there's no draws available, I think his range is pretty simple. Pocket pairs like deuces through nines, or a hand like king, queen, or ace jack that's floating to try and improve. Keeping that in mind, we're off to a turn which rolls out the 6 of spades, completing the rainbow. Unless our opponent specifically has pocket sixes, this card shouldn't really change anything. I could give up and check since I'm just sitting here with ace high, but I have a tight image in this game, and I want to use that to my advantage. So I throw out a bet of $110, looking to go for gold on the river if he calls. But now he puts in the disgusting min raise to 220. This is never a bluff in a million years, so I just toss my hand in the muck and he shows 10-7 of clubs for flop trips. Glad he bailed me out with that raise because I was going all the way with it. But just like that, we find ourselves stuck immediately. In order to not be short stacked, I add on $500 and I'm now into the game for $1,000 total. While I'm trying to add on chips, we get involved in another interesting spot. There's 3 limps from the field, and I'm in the cutoff and look down at pocket sevens. I raise the price of poker to $20, get called by the small blind and under the gun limper who's the player that just owned us with trip sevens, so I'm looking for my revenge. With $60 in the pot, we're off to a flop 3 ways of king-king-4 with 2 hearts, which seems pretty safe. Action gets checked to me, and I settle on a value bet of $35 and only get called from the player under the gun. Since he limped under the gun, he could have all the worst pocket pairs we're ahead of, heart draws with all the suited connectors, and not much else. Feeling pretty good we're in the lead, even when the 6 of spades rolls out. Pocket sixes now has us destroyed, but when he checks it over again, my plan is simple. Bet an amount to charge pocket 2s through pocket 5s, all his flush draw combos, and check back every single river unless it's the miracle 7. So I stick to the plan and throw out a bet of $65. Once again, our opponent quickly calls, increasing this pot to $235, and we're off to a river in the 5 of clubs. He checks for a 3rd straight time. I got all the value from worse hands I could possibly get, so I check it back and he shows king jack offsuit for flop trips. Again. I felt like I was in the lead when he just called on the turn. I guess the joke's on me today. After losing to trips back-to-back hands and having to shamefully color down our chips, things took a turn for the worse because I went flop dead. I got dealt some solid hands, but I couldn't connect with the flop if my life depended on it. We're 90 minutes into our session, so let's ask Stanley, spell it backwards yield nats, how many pots I've won today.
0!
With things not looking so good, we see Under the Gun open the action to $10 off a short stack. Hijack calls. I'm on the button and look down at the jackasses, pocket jacks. Short stack hasn't raised a hand all day, so the fact that he did, especially Under the Gun, is a little concerning. But he only has $85 left in his stack. If he has us beat, so be it. It's time to play for it all. I put in a 3-bet to $40, honestly hoping Under the Gun just flats, which will most likely bring in the hijack, who I know I'm ahead of. Under the Gun ends up going all in for $85 total. Hijack gets out of the way, and I obviously snap call and show him what he's up against. With $180 to compete for, we're off to a decent flop of Queen 9 Deuce Rainbow, giving us second pair. Turn seems safe in the 7 of spades, and river rolls out the 5 of spades. Our opponent shows his hand and reveals pocket 10s, which we barely have beat. Not the biggest pot, and it took over an hour and a half to win it, but I'll take it any way I could get it at this point. First pot. After losing all our profit from that jack's hand with pocket 10s and a 3-bet pot, we then get an even bigger upgrade. This next one, the low jack opens the action to $15. Hijack calls. I'm on the cutoff and look down at the Cowboys, pocket kings. Since I'm in position and I don't have a big stack, I wanted to raise to an amount where I could get both players to call, and I could try to at least double, maybe even triple up. So I put in a 3-bet to $55. Just like we wanted, both players end up putting in the chips. With 165 in the middle, we're off to a flop 3 ways of Queen Jack 7 with 2 clubs, giving us the overpair on a pretty connected board. Checks to me. I throw out a half pot bet of $80 to get value from all the worst pairs and draws, but both players end up folding. Nice to get some money back and headed in the right direction again. Next hand up is one of the more ridiculous ones I've played in a while. Early position decides to limp, folds to the cutoff, who raises to $15. I'm next to act on the button and look down at my least favorite Broadway hand in poker in King Jack offsuit. Never know what to do pre-flop with this hand, so I settle on the squeeze play this time and raise the price of poker to $40, having blockers to a lot of strong holdings. I surprisingly get cold called by the original limper in early position, which caught me off guard. Now the cutoff is getting an amazing price to continue, so he calls the extra $25 as well, increasing this pot to $120. Off to a flop 3 ways, we get the 100th paired board of the day when it rolls out 10-10 Deuce Rainbow, giving us 2 overcards and a backdoor straight draw. Both players check and flow, and if this was heads up, I'd throw in a range bet the majority of the time, but I'm not a big fan of bluffing on dry flops when there's 3-way action. I don't really have fold equity, I would hate to face a raise and be forced to fold, so I decide to realize my equity and check it back to see a free turn. Still 3 ways, and it rolls out a very interesting card in the Queen of Clubs, giving us an open-ended straight draw. Checks to the cutoff and now throws out a bet of just $45, which to me screamed major strength or major weakness. I figured he'd either have a full house that's trying to bait us in with a small bet, or he has a pocket pair smaller than a queen that's throwing out a feeler bet to get value from all the draws and find out where they're at. I don't think him having a queen was likely because 1, he would have sized up bigger with all the draws available, and 2, we have all the blockers to most queens, making it less likely he has one. Given that we have a draw to Broadway and getting a fair price to continue, I slide in calling chips and the player in early position gets out of the way. So with 2-10 in the middle, we're off to a river which peels off a crazy card in the 10 of spades, putting 3 10s on the board. Our opponent now slows down and checks. If he had a queen or a 10, I'm pretty confident he still would have thrown out a bet for value, worried I'd check it back. So I think he either has a small full house or a hand like ace-jack. Since I'm sitting here with just king high, I'm losing to every single one of those holdings. So in order to win this pot, I'm gonna have to attempt a bluff and make my story believable. Since I checked back the flop and called the turn, my hand looks a lot like ace-king, king-jack, and a ton of queen X hands like ace-queen, king-queen, and queen-jack. In order to make it look like I have a value hand, I I need to figure out what sizing I bet with all my Queen X hands when I'm going for value, which is why I settled on a bet of $105. I didn't want to polarize myself and bet a huge amount because that usually screams bluff and it tends to get looked up lighter. I wanted to bet an amount that looks super value heavy. It seems to have put our opponent in the blender because he goes in the tank for over a minute. I'm glad we faded the snap call because that means he doesn't have a queen, but I'm a little worried now because he obviously has a better hand than us if he's debating on making the call. But luckily he doesn't and ends up tossing his hand in the muck and we get one through. I never recommend making this bluff against a calling station, but this player seems pretty solid and understands ranges, which is why I decided to go for it. After creeping our way a little closer to the even mark, not too much time goes by before we find ourselves in another interesting spot. This one action folds to the same opponent from last hand on the hijack and he opens to $15. I'm next to act in the cutoff and look down at the beautiful holding and ace-jack of spades. If I'm 3-betting king-jack offsuit, then you know damn well I'm 3-betting this hand, so in order to not have a sizing tell, I put in a raise to the same amount of $40. Folds back to our opponent who must be tired of our shit because he puts in a 4-bet to 120. Smart play would be to fold and move on since we're not that deep, and I doubt he's making this play with ace-10 or worse. But I have position and already have 40% of a royal flush. I wouldn't be showing this to you guys if I folded, so since I have to make a vlog, we're putting in the call, increasing this pot to 240. Off to a flop heads up of king-6 deuce with 2 spades giving us the nut flush draw. Surprisingly, our opponent starts off with a check, which caught me off guard. He could be trapping with his massive hands like aces, kings, and ace-kings since this is a pretty dry board, or he could have pocket 10s through queens and is afraid of the king. Regardless of what hand he has, I should be checking this back 100% of the time so I could see a free turn card, but instead I pull a move straight out of Lloyd and Harry's playbook from Dumb and Dumber and throw out a bet of $65. I say that because this sizing does absolutely nothing for us. If he has those massive hands, then I'm just giving him free money. If I'm trying to bluff him off queens or jacks, then I should be sizing way up. To no one's surprise, our opponent puts in the call. We're off to a turn which rolls out the deuce of hearts pairing the board. He checks in flow, and I decided to do what I should have done in the first place and check it back. Hoping for a spade or an ace to give us the best hand, but the river peels off a crazy card and the deuce of diamonds, putting 3 of them on the board. I don't know what the hell is going on with these boards today, but one thing is certain. They're definitely not making my life any easier, especially after our opponent throws out a super small bet of $45. I feel like all 3 options are on the table. Go all in, call, or fold. I think going all in would be an awful play because 1, he has the nut advantage by being the pre-flop 4-better since I almost never have aces or kings in my range. 2, even if I did go all in, I probably never get queens or jacks to fold since I check back the turn and the likelihood of me having a king is super rare. Calling is my least favorite option because what hand do low stakes players 4-bet that's worse than ace-jack? None of them. So option number 3 is what I decide to go with and just toss my hand in the muck. I think his small bet of $45 was screaming he had the nuts and wanted to bait me in with the small sizing to come over the top. Just gonna limit the damage, take the loss, and move on. At this point in the day, I'm down over $600 and playing some of the worst poker of my life.
You suck, you jackass!
Even though I'm stuck piles, I'll never shy away from throwing on the $6 straddle to increase the action. The player to my left opens to $25. Low jack calls, small blind calls. When it folds over to me, I look down at 8-6 offsuit. Being that I only have to call $19 more to win a pot of 100, there's only one move, which is to defend my straddle. I throw in the extra chips. We're off to another paired board of 8-8-4 with 2 diamonds giving us trips. Still don't know what is going on with these paired boards, but it feels nice to finally be on the right side of one. Small blind starts off with a check. I check. Now the original raiser throws out a pretty small bet of $30. Seems like no one's fazed by this because under the gun 1 calls, small blind calls, now action's on me. None of these guys are floating with random overcards like queen jack or king 10, so they have to have something. I think there's one or two pocket pairs in the mix, probably a flush draw, and maybe a straight draw that I all need to get value from. Since my stack isn't that deep and I don't want to scare anyone away, I decided to raise to 130 to make sure I could set up a turn jam. Original razor folds, but now the low jack goes all in and has me covered. I have the easiest call of my life, so I snap it off and everyone else gets out of the way. I show our opponent what he's up against and he shows ace-6 of diamonds for the nut flush draw. This opponent has had my number all day thus far, so I'm looking for my revenge. There's now $870 in the pot. We're off to see a run out, hoping to fade a diamond. Turn is safe in the 7 of hearts, and the river peels off. The deuce of spades giving us the winner and allowing us to scoop in this massive pot. Now I just got one thing to say.
Tell them to bring me my money.
A few orbits went by, and at this point we're only down $165, which feels surreal from where we were just a few minutes ago. Next hand up, under the gun opens the action to $15. 4 people call, and I'm in the big blind and look down at my least favorite Broadway hand in poker in King Jack offsuit. Remember when I said earlier I had no clue how to play this pre-flop? Well, this is just another example of that. I could obviously just call for $12 more and see a cheap flop, but I'm trying to dig out of this hole and make a miracle comeback. So since I have blockers to a lot of strong holdings and this hand doesn't play well multi-way, I decided to implement this squeeze play and throw in a raise to $115, looking to either take down $60 of dead money or play a bloated pot with the range advantage. But neither of those things are gonna happen because under the gun puts in a re-raise to $295. Folds back to me, and unfortunately it's time to abort mission since he's never doing this with anything worse. So I toss my hand in the muck and move on. We played for a bit longer, but I decided to bail before I blast off all my money from playing some awful poker. If you thought today was crazy, make sure you stay for day 2 because it gets even crazier. But for now, let's get to the outro. I can confidently say that was the worst I played all year long. Just glad I got bailed out by 8-6 offsuit to limit the damage. In for 1,000, not for 702 for a $298 loss. For day 2, we bought into the 1-2 game for the max of $300 and wasted no time before getting in on the action. Unlike day 1, the goal for today is to get back to our normal self and play solid, methodical poker. The first hand comes just a few minutes into our session, and the $5 straddle is on, which I love to see because it means players are here to gamble. The entire table decides to call the $5. I'm in the big blind and look down at ace-9 offsuit. Could just call for only $3 more, or honestly even fold because we're trying to play solid poker. But I go with option 3 and raise it up to 35. I felt like no one was too strong since it didn't get raised pre-flop, and there's a lot of dead money out there that I'm trying to get my hands on. We're gonna have to work for that money because we get 2 customers including under the gun and early position limper, so with 120 in the pot we're off to a flop 3 ways of king 4-3 with 2 hearts, giving us ace high and a dream. I honestly love this flop because I have the range advantage since neither of our opponents should have ace king or pocket kings. I overheard a player across the table tell someone how he folded a king, so I'm going to use that information to my advantage and rep one myself. So I decided to throw out a c-bet of $45, which is the sizing I'd use with all my value hands, and just get called by the first limper, increasing this pot to 210. I think he could have a lot of non-believing pairs smaller than the king since I bet pretty small, as well as heart draws, straight draws, and the occasional king. Keeping that in mind, we're off to a turn which peels off the deuce of diamonds, giving us a straight draw. 5-6 gets there for the straight and has us drawing dead, but with multiple flush draws available that I'm most likely ahead of, having the range advantage, and knowing someone folded a king, I'm going to use that to my advantage and rep a monster by going for glory and go all in. I faded the snap call, which I'd love to see, so I could take ace king, king queen, and 6-5 out of his range, so now I'm just hoping for a fold to win this one with a bluff and be in the positive right away. That's not going to happen because our opponent ends up putting in the call and shows the ladies, pocket queens. Not only was I surprised he limped in with a monster and never re-raised at any point, Also shocked he called off over $200 with a king out there. But none of that matters because I need an ace or a 5 in order to fade disaster. Dealer burns a card and throws out the 7 of hearts, and we double up our opponent. Don't really mind it how I played post flop, but I could have easily avoided losing this massive pot by simply folding pre-flop. In order to not be short stacked, add on $200 in chips. I'm now into the game for $500 total. In this next hand, there's 2 limps from the field, and when action's on me on the cutoff, I look down at ace-8 of spades. Good enough for a raise, so I make it $15 to go. You get called by both blinds and one of the players in middle position. Off to a flop 4 ways of 7-5-3 with 2 spades, giving us the nut flush draw and some backdoor straight draw opportunities. Big blind decides to lead into the field for a bet of $20. Player in middle position calls, and now action's on me. I could just call since I'm getting an amazing price to continue, but in order to get the best possible odds of winning this pot, I need to ensure that I see a full run out and not have to be forced to fold on a blank turn. Since I'm also the pre-flop aggressor, I have all the big overpairs in my range, and a raise can get our opponents to fold all their weak 1 pair holdings, worried that I have a monster. So in order to accomplish this, there's only one thing to do, which is put in a raise and go for gold. So I raise the price of poker to $100, which gets the small blind out of the way, but the big blind isn't scared and goes all in for the rest of his chips. Not too surprising since he was the one to lead out into the field. This forces the player in middle position to fold, which is what we were hoping for. I show my opponent what he's up against, and he shows 7-5 offsuit for top 2 pair. Didn't think he was this strong, so we're gonna need some help. Turn peels off the ace of hearts, giving us a few more outs, and the river rolls out the dirtiest card in the deck, and the 8 of diamonds, giving us runner 2 pair to stack our opponent. Wasn't the way I pictured winning this hand after seeing the flop, but instead of being down piles, I'm somehow now above the even mark. For this next one, I throw on the $4 straddle and 4 people put in the call. Folds to me, and I look down at king jack offsuit. I don't want to take this hand super multi-way, so I raise it up to $35, just get called by the button, which is what I was hoping for. There's $85 in the middle, and our opponent only has $65 left in his stack. I figured this pot's too big to give up on, and I want to make sure I see a full run out, so I decided to just put them all in the dark before we even see a flop. Dealer eventually burns a card and throws out a 9-8-7 all spade flop, giving us a straight flush draw. We fade the snap call, which is good, so I'm hoping he folds, but even if he calls, we probably have decent equity since it sent him in the tank. He eventually does put in the chips, increasing this pot to 215. We're off to see a run out, and I have no clue what I'm up against. Turn is solid, and the 4 of spades, giving us the jack high flush, and river 10 of diamonds shouldn't change anything. Our opponent looks frustrated and ends up tossing his hand in the muck. Glad we just went with it pre-flop to make our decision a lot easier. Next hand occurs just a few orbits later. Action folds to me on the button, and I look down at king 10 of diamonds, which is obviously good enough for a raise. I make it $10 to go and get called by both blinds, and the flop rolls out 9-8-4 with 2 spades, giving us just 2 overcards. Checks to me, being that there's no diamond on this flop and this specific board connects a lot better with their ranges than mine, decide to check it back and see a free turn. Turn rolls out the 10 of hearts, giving us top pair second best kicker, and now the small blind throws out a bet of $10. Big blind folds, and I debated raising for a second to charge all the combo draws, but decided against it and just call, increasing this pot to 50. Hard to put him on a range until we see a river, which rolls out the biggest blank in the deck and the deuce of clubs. He now slows down and checks, which in my opinion is the best possible scenario because I'm confident we have him beat. I figured he'd throw out a river bet with all his 2 pairs, straights, and ace 10, which has us out kicked. So now I'm putting him on a hand that has some showdown value like queen 9, jack 10, or 8-7. Usually I'd bet small to try and ensure I get called, but if we put ourselves in our opponent's shoes, my hand looks like I either missed a draw or have random overcards since I didn't bet the flop or raise on the turn. Remember when I mentioned earlier that I was going to use my loose image to my advantage? Well, now's the time to do so. I throw out a pretty big bet of $40, which sends our opponent in the tank. He He eventually comes to a decision and throws in calling chips. We roll over our hand and he ends up tossing his hand in the muck. Pretty happy with how I read the situation and got close to max value. I decided to switch seats to get a better view for the vlog, and even though we lost a few uneventful pots, we're still up $135 on the day despite that awful start. In our first notable hand at the new table, the $4 straddle is on. Everyone calls the $4 before action's on me in the low jack, and I look down at ace deuce of diamonds. I could raise, but decided against it because I have a hand that you want to keep as many ranges in as possible because it has the potential to make the nuts and dominate a ton of other holdings. So after I call, 3 others call as well, so we're going 8 ways to a flop of 7-5-3 with 2 diamonds, giving us a straight flush draw. The big blind decides to throw out a super small bet of $6. Now the player to my right puts in a re-raise to 20. In my opinion, there's 0 point in raising because 2 people already showed strength, so the only move here is to call. I throw in the chips, and so does the hijack and big blind, increasing this pot to 110. Really only hoping for a diamond, because even though a 4 gives us a straight, it'll also give any hand containing a 6 in it a higher straight. So going 4 ways to a turn, which is no help to us in the queen of clubs. Now action gets checked to me, and I debated going for the bluff, but decided against it since I have a loose table image and will get looked up lighter than usual. So I check, hoping to see a free river, but now the hijack throws out a bet for $45. Big blind comes along for the ride, and the player to my right gets out of the way. I have some history with the hijack, and he's never betting here unless he has something strong, especially being last to act, so I'm most likely putting him on a set or 2 pair and not much else. Never raising since I don't have any fold equity, so I call the $45, increasing this pot to $245. We're off to a miracle river and the 8 of diamonds, giving us the stone cold nuts. Big blind checks again, and I figured if he had a flush, he would have led the river, so my goal with this bet is to target sets in 2 pairs since it's unlikely anyone else has a flush given the action. So I throw out a value bet of $95 and get snap called by the hijack, which I definitely wasn't expecting. Big blind ends up folding, and I obviously roll over the winner. After seeing my hand, the hijack slams down his hand out of frustration and reveals king queen of diamonds for the second nuts. I knew he wasn't betting a naked draw on the turn, so his bet makes a lot more sense now. If I took him having queen x of diamonds into consideration, I would have bombed the river. No complaints here as we scoop in this massive pot. If you thought last hand was wild, just wait for this one. 4 people limp, and I'm in the small blind and look down at 6-7 of clubs. Could just call for $1 more, but stacks are super deep and I want to play in as many bloated pots as possible, which is why I raise the price of poker to $20. We get called by the big blind and player in early position, so we're going 3 ways to a flop of 10-8-5 rainbow, giving us an open-ended straight draw. These middling boards connect a lot more with our opponent's limp calling ranges, so I decide to check since I'm out of position and evaluate what our opponents do. If I see a bet and a raise, then I could just fold, but if I see a small bet, then I could check re-raise our opponents and rep a monster, since 2 pairs should rarely be represented and there aren't any possible straights on this flop. But it won't come to any of that because action gets checked through. Still going 3 ways to a turn, and it peels off the queen of clubs, giving us additional outs with a flush draw. Queen should be better for our range, so I take a stab with my combo draw and just get called by a player in early position. I think he would have bet all his 10x hands since he was last to act, so I think he either has a draw or ran into the queen. Hoping for a 4 or any club to give us the winner, the river rolls out a complete blank and the deuce of spades. Since it's more likely our opponent ran into a queen than missed a draw since I'm blocking a ton of them, I decide to wave the white flag and give up and check. Our opponent also decides to check, and I roll over my hand and said I was bluffing. He shows 7-4 spades for the missed gut shot, and to my utter shock, our 6 kicker plays and we scoop in this solid pot with just 7 high. I remember winning a pot with jack high once, which I thought was crazy, but to only have 7 high at showdown and win $75 in profit is insane. In this next hand, 3 people limp, and I'm on the cutoff and look down at jack 8 of diamonds. Since I have position on the field with a playable hand, I Decide to raise to $15 and get called by the big blind and 3 limpers. Going 5 ways to another crazy flop of queen 10-8 with 2 diamonds, giving us a pair, straight draw, and flush draw all at once. The big blind decides to take over the betting lead and throws out a bet of $27. Player in early position calls. When action gets folded to me, I have a decision. Raise or just call. Since I've been paying attention at the table and not being all loosey-goosey having a sandwich, I've noticed he's only led into the field with top pair or better. So even though I have a ton of equity against most holdings, I still only have bottom pair and would like to improve before I pile on money against a player who isn't going to fold if I raise. So I just call the $27 bet in position. We're off to a turn 3 ways, which rolls out the beautiful 3 of diamonds, giving us the flush. Action gets checked to me, which means I don't think anyone has a flush, so the goal right now is to bet an amount that 2 pairs and straights can call. I decided $75 is the best sizing to get action, and it seems to do the job because the big blind ends up putting in the call. The spot has quickly ballooned to over $300, and we're off to a river hoping the board doesn't pair and we could fade a 4th diamond. And we get what we want when the king of hearts rolls out on the river. He checks it over. We have the same goal on the river as we did on the turn. Bet an amount that gets 2 pairs and straights to put in the chips. I wanted to bet less than half pot to try and get looked up light, so I settled on a bet of $135, but he quickly folds and we take it down. In this next hand, a player in early position opens the action to $15. Low jack calls, and I'm in the big blind and look down at jack 10 offsuit. Could fold since the original raiser has a pretty short stack for how much he raised, but since I'm last to act and have a vlog to make, I put in the extra $13 ready to go to battle. Going 3 ways to a miracle flop of queen 9-8 with 2 clubs, giving us the nuts on a super connected board. I check and flow. Now the original raiser continues the aggression with a bet of $20. Low jack folds. Now we have ourselves a decision. Call or go all in. I'm never worried about someone drawing out on me, but I would hate to just call the $20 and a scare card rolls out on the turn that kills our action. So that leaves us only with one option, which is to put our opponent to the test and go all in. We fade the snap call, which is great news for us because a set or 2 pair would have called off, so he doesn't have much equity against us. He eventually does put in the chips, increasing this pot to $215, and I fast roll my hand. Turn is in the best in the jack of diamonds, and river is even worse in the 7 of clubs, but luckily our opponent rolls over king queen offsuit and we end up with the winner. I think it's safe to say we're on a heater. At this point in the day, we've managed to build a great wall of red chips and find ourselves up over $730, which is crazy for a capped morning 1-2 game. In our next interesting hand, under the gun limps, I'm in the hijack and look down at ace queen offsuit. Good enough for a raise, so I bump up the price of admission to $12 and just get called by the limper. With $25 in the pot, we're off to a flop heads up of ace 10-8 rainbow, giving us top pair, second best kicker. Our opponent checks, and a big mistake I see low stakes players make is check back in this spot. When there's 2 Broadway cards on the flop, it's super important to bet to get your value early because there's a lot of tricky turns that can cause trouble. So I start off with a C bet of $15 and our opponent quickly calls. Could have an ace, could have a straight draw, or a 10, but it's hard to know just yet. Off to a turn, and it peels off the 3 of clubs. Even though it seems like a blank, it could easily give our opponent more equity with a backdoor flush draw, and now have us beat with ace 3. But not going to be scared of monsters under the bed, so after he checks, I continue the aggression with a bet of $30 to charge all the draws and get value from worse aces. Once again, our opponent quickly calls, increasing this pot to $115. Now I'm hoping for a non-club ace to make my life easier. We get a very interesting card in the queen of clubs, giving us top 2 pair, but bringing in jack 9 for the straight and all the backdoor flushes. If our opponent led into us, I'd probably just call since I couldn't get called by worse if I raised, but he decides to check for a 3rd straight time. Top 2 pair is way too strong to check back, so my goal is to target a weak ace and maybe a hand like queen 10. So I throw out a bet of $45, and after a little hesitation, our opponent decides to put in the call, and I roll over the winner after he tosses his hand in the muck. I wish this heater lasted forever, but unfortunately it came to an end after we lost a few small pots, so let's get to the outro. Despite blasting off our stack in the first hand of the day, glad I was able to snap out of it and book our biggest 1-2 win of the year. In for 500, now for 1304 for a massive $804 win. Despite playing some of the worst poker of my life, I somehow managed to still turn a profit. Played 6.5 hours of live poker this week and profited $506 for an hourly win rate of $77.85. As for our 1-2 stats, they finally got a much needed boost. After that massive win, I've now played 97 hours even in this game and profited $3,341 for an hourly win rate of $34.44. Only 3 hours left to reach 100 hours total at this stake and get a final number. Even though we lost at 1-3 this week, we somehow avoided disaster. We've now played 94 hours even in this game and profited $3,809 for an hourly win rate of $40.52. Still have 6 hours left to play in this stake, and anything can happen when the game plays this big, so I can't get complacent. Combining all these stats, I've now played 191 hours of live poker in 2025 and profited $7,150 for an hourly win rate of $37.43. Fired up about these numbers with only 9 hours left to play in the year, but need to stay focused and keep our head down to finish the job and reach our goal. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you guys run good at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my new year-end goal of 31,000 subscribers.